11, measuring the cost of living for macroeconomics. All right, so make sure you've got these formulas up here on in your notes. They will be provided on the test and quiz, but would like you to have them in your notes. You know, when we're talking about the cost of living and inflation, we're talking about the rise in the general price level. So it's not just cell phones getting more expensive. It's not just toilet paper getting more expensive, or clothing getting more expensive, or apples getting more expensive. It's, if you take into account the measure that includes all of these items that a normal household needs to buy, and it's called the basket of goods and services, and that's why I drew a little basket around it there. That's just what the government calls it. That's what we're looking at for inflation. And our government, the Bureau of Labor Statistics, they really do this. They call retailers and track these prices from month to month to monitor the price levels of these things. So we got most of these things. I don't think anyone mentioned our car, but certainly our transportation and gas. We all got a lot of the other things: clothing, food, sports equipment, and emissions for recreational activities, haircuts, all that goes into other. So they take all of these things, track the prices from month to month, year to year, and I've got one basket over here, and if I could copy and paste all of our items, and in real life it would be all of these things that they've got, all of these items over here, and I'll show you how to calculate this index in a second. We're going to calculate a simple one. But when the index for all the items in the next period, let's say this is 2013 versus 2012, has increased, that's inflation. When the overall measure, because it's not just one item increasing or decreasing. Switch back over here to our PowerPoint. All right, you don't have to memorize these categories that the Bureau of Labor Statistics had up here. I just was trying to explain to you where they got those 200 items that they use for the basket of goods and services in real life. All right, but you do need to know that inflation is a rise in the overall price level. The overall price level, not just one. And look, it says some may even fall. If our index, which is used to take into account all this stuff, has gone up overall, maybe from last year to this year, TP might have actually gotten cheaper. But if housing, or if clothing gets more expensive, and medical equipment gets more expensive, and medical care and food gets super expensive, even if we have a few items getting cheaper, that's what they're talking about right here. Some prices may actually fall. If we've got a whole bunch of items that are increasing, then the index, which takes into account all of it, is going to go up. And that's what we call inflation. So our measure for economic growth, GDP, gross domestic product. Our measure for inflation is the CPI, or the Consumer Price Index. And where does the government get it? They track these 200 items that normal households buy and use those numbers to construct the basket. So we're going to construct a simple one. We're not going to have 200 items in ours, but these are some basic steps in how to calculate a simple CPI. First of all, fix the basket. That means figure out what's going, what products you have and how many you have of them. You multiply that by the prices of each item, and then you can figure out your total basket cost. Just like when you're checking out at HEB. If you have 2 boxes of cookies and they're $3 each, then 2 times 3 is a total of 6. Same thing here. Okay, there should be an extra O right there. So step 4, choose a base year. Now, when we're talking about inflation, we're talking about an increase in the level of prices. So remember, it doesn't even make sense if you're not comparing back to another period. How do you know if prices have gone up or gone down? You're comparing, right? Well, when we're comparing back to this year, in this case 2012, this would be considered our base year. Now, it doesn't have to be 2012. What if we wanted to look at prices now versus year 2000? Or 1985, or 1960? That's fine. It's just whatever we're comparing back to, this is going to be our base year. So you're going to take how much it cost in that year, the year you're comparing, and now, and put it into your CPI formula that she wrote down and we'll use in a second. Once you figure out the CPI, you can plug that into the inflation rate formula. This is how the inflation rate formula is given in the book. I just worded it a little bit differently, what you've wrote down, so I think it makes more sense to talk about the previous year. But you can think of it as year 1, year 2. It's the same thing. Okay, let's take a look at an example. Can y'all see this from the back? Okay, we've got a simple basket of 2 hamburgers and 4 hot dogs. And if these are the prices, let's take a look at 2008. So hot dog is $1 and hamburgers are $2. How much is it going to cost us total to buy 4 hot dogs and 2 hamburgers in 2008? 10. Okay, so if hot dogs are $1 each, so that's going to be $4, right? Hamburgers are $2 each, that's 4. 4 plus 4 is a total of 8. And that's what we're doing here. That first formula you were writing down, it said the basket cost. This is what we're doing to figure out the basket cost. There's not going to be a formula on the quiz or test about how to figure out the basket cost. You just have to remember it's price times quantity for each item that you have. That's what we do before you check out at HEB. In 2009, we're doing the same thing. You're just using 2009 prices. So 2 times 4, $2 times 4 hot dogs, and $3 times 2 hamburgers equals $14. Okay. So you do that for each year. So we've got our basket costs here, $8, $14 in 2009, and $20 in 2010. Once you have that information, you can use that first formula that she wrote down. This year's basket cost divided by the base year's basket cost times 100. Okay, so it's given to you that 2008 is the base year. So 2008, we're talking about 2008, that's this year's basket cost. The 8 goes on top. What goes on bottom? The base year's basket cost. It was given to you in the formula as we're going to use 2008, so we're going to use the same number here. 8 divided by 8 times 100 is equal to 100. For 2009, looking back at the formula again, it's this year's basket cost. So here's this year, 2009. We're going to find the 2009 basket cost, 14. And the denominator, the base year's basket cost, we know that's 2008. So we're going to put 8 on the bottom. And we times 100, that's the CPI for 2009. Everybody's okay on this step? All right. So this is just price times quantity. This, we're just using that first formula there. And like I said, once you figure out the CPI, you can plug that into the inflation rate formula. Okay. I know you have this in your notes, but just a reminder. This year's CPI minus the previous year's divided by the previous year's times 100. Okay, so this is 2009. This year is 2009. 2009 CPI, which we figured out over here, minus the previous year's CPI, that would be 2008, and the CPI for that's right here, divided by the previous year's 75% inflation. Okay, 2010, that's this year's CPI. We got that from the 2010 number, minus the previous year's, that's 2009, divided by the previous year's times 100. Okay, so this is how you do it. price times quantity, calculate CPI, and then you can figure out the inflation. Is the CPI for the base year always going to be 100? There's 100 here. So if you look at the formula again, it's this year's CPI divided by the base year's CPI. Is it always going to be 100?
Yes, because by itself.
Yes, it's always going to be divided by itself. So, times 100, the CPI for the base year will always be 100. We try to keep inflation in real life below 2% or below 3%, depending on how conservative of an economist you talk to. So these would be terrible inflation rates in real life, but that's just for an example there. All right, well, let's take a look. I'm going to let you try one. First thing to do when I give you this handout. It says it up here, but it's in italics, it's real small. But basically what they're saying is to change all your quantities. Instead of hot dogs and hamburgers, we've got beef and pork. Just change all your quantities to 100. So as soon as I give you your handout, we'll do that. Okay. And I'll stop the recording here while we're working on our handout.